like Israelski, Ursula's father.
Okay, we'll just squirt it. It smells so good. There you go. Dr. Browners.
Dr. Browners.
They have been so good to us. And by keeping this environment, it allows us to take our mask off. I'm Sandra Scheller with the Chula Vista Heritage Museum and the South Bay Historical Society. And I am so lucky and blessed because I am with Elizabeth Tobias. Elizabeth and I have known each other, I hate to say this, since you were like 13.
My whole life?
Your whole life. Growing up here in Chula Vista. And you're a very intricate part of this exhibit. So let me just say thank you for right now, because it takes a village and it takes people to help me with what's going on. For those of you who come to the exhibit, you will see Max Weinstock, and Elizabeth is the granddaughter of Max. And I have a question for you. Do you remember anything about Grandpa and Grandma?
Well, my grandmother, Eva, and I were very close through, my entire life into my early adulthood when she passed away. And my grandfather died when I was 5 years old. And so my relationship with him is kind of on the imaginal level. And I feel like I have a really deep relationship with my grandfather, because I feel like I work a lot to make him proud.
Mm-hmm. He loved family. When family got together with your aunts, your mom, and when he was around this, here's your daughters and then the grandchildren or whatever. He was so proud of that. You could tell that he's just really loved family. And yet, I wonder if it's because of what happened to him. We know that at the age of 21, we believe it was 21 years old, that Max fled Poland, tried to come to the United States, ended up in Mexico, where he started selling shoes. Mm-hmm. He found shoes from somebody that didn't quite match. It might be two left ones or two right ones. So he painted them and fixed them up and sold them, and then went into another village. And from there he met somebody in Pueblo, or what was the city, where he learned about the furniture business. And he really grew that furniture business. And then he came to Tijuana.
Well, my mother was born in Tampico.
In Tampico, that's it. Tampico. Yes,
Tamaulipas, Mexico, where my Aunt Esther and my mom were born. Yeah, my grandfather, that is the folklore, that he painted mismatched shoes, and that was his first business.
Yeah.
And, I feel the memories that I have of my grandfather are kind of diffuse, because I was only 5 years old, and memories from childhood like that, or long ago memories, are like postcards. They're not real tangible memories, but I have postcards. I remember going to my grandfather's funeral, and what this feeling of this being a very important man from his funeral, because he had such a huge funeral. And I just remember this feeling of awe of my grandfather just by the scope of his funeral. Mm-hmm. That's one postcard, one memory that I have. I remember.
I love that. I love that you're saying postcards. That's really cool.
Well, that's all I have of him, as I was so young. And I remember him being in bed a lot. He was very sick. And so, so I have postcards of memories of my grandfather. And, again, remembering his funeral, and what a large event that was, what a large gathering that was, and it felt like he was such an important man. I have postcards, snapshots of his business in Tijuana, and he's always leading a pack, and it looks like he's having some kind of meeting with with so many people following behind him, he's giving some kind of directive. So I have pictures of that. And he was a small man, but he seemed to be a very mighty presence. I have memories based on what my father's told me. And my father is a very type A personality, and somehow my grandfather was a person that he feared in many ways, and he learned a lot from my grandfather. So I take a lot of stories from my own father about my grandfather, and what a perfectionist he was, and how nothing was ever good enough for my grandfather. And then I remember my grandfather being in bed and being sick, and visiting my grandmother's house and not wanting to make too much noise to disturb him, but of him wanting his family there, and of wanting us there. And I would steal candy, and I would hide in the closet. And that's one of my fond memories. I had Kraft caramel candies, and I would find them in the pantry in the kitchen. I would go take about 5, because our family had really strict diet, and we weren't allowed to eat sugar. We were like the early, we were on
vegan, vegetarian,
on the
keep
first
it healthy.
wave of health food, no vaccine, all kinds of concepts that were far, far, far ahead of their time that my grandfather followed. And so candy was like so forbidden. So I would take a bunch of the caramels and go in the closet in the den.
Like a squirrel.
Yes, and I would unwrap them and eat one after the other and stuff my cheeks, like you said, like a squirrel, with my caramels, and it's sticky, and I'm trying to eat it, and stuff the little wrappers in my pockets. And I laugh now when I find candy wrappers of my daughter, and I scold her, but I laugh because
that is so funny, because again, we have these memories, and we've turned them into really good memories, especially because your grandfather went through so much. I believe he was one that had malaria, and going from Tijuana to Pasadena, meeting somebody to help him. If I'm not mistaken, when we were doing this interview, Leah was telling me about hydrocortisone, and yet this was used back in the 40s or 50s, in the 40s, just to hear these words repeated over again in the news were, when it came to what's happening to our COVID situation now. I just look at your grandfather as a survivor on many different levels. The fact that his mother was killed in a camp. If I'm not mistaken, it was Auschwitz, not Auschwitz, but a camp is a camp is a camp. I just have to say that. He just was this amazing person. Obviously, he must have felt the ridicule of being Jewish in Poland, which made him say, enough, I'm not going to take this, and leaving his homeland and coming to a new place, and then starting a family with your beautiful grandmother, who, if I'm not mistaken, Eva, was Russian, correct?
Yeah, so my grandmother was from Odessa, so she's from the Ukraine, but at that time, it was all part of, Russia. So but my grandmother and my grandmother had an extraordinary way of making every grandchild feel like her favorite grandchild. So although I really might have been her favorite grandchild, I'm not sure.
That's great.
No, she really...
But you felt the love.
I really did. And my grandmother and I would play backgammon, and we would have just extraordinary moments together. And I just feel so grateful to have had the times I did with my grandmother Eva, who really was there's nobody else like my grandma Eva. For anybody that knew her, she was quite beautiful. She always had to have her face
gorgeous.
Put on, and
yes.
her makeup. And
I will tell you, your mother was stunning. Your mama, Miss Anita, was stunning. I always thought I couldn't tell the difference between her and Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, she had that kind
really
of
beautiful.
Movie star.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beauty.
Yeah, she sure did.
That I unfortunately did not inherit from my mom, but
yes, you did. and
No, but
here
she
you
was
grew up in
extraordinarily
Chula
beautiful.
Vista.
Rosebank Elementary.
Rosebank.
And then I went to Hilltop Junior High for 1 year. And then around that time, we had a real unfortunate family tragedy, and that my older brother committed suicide. And after that tragedy, I think my mom wanted a different school environment for me, something a little smaller, something a little more nurturing. So I changed schools and commuted every day from Chula Vista to Francis Parker's school. And then when I was in high school, my mom moved to Coronado. I think for her to have a different, a change of pace, a change of scenery, and to have a much easier, kind of more comfortable life for herself, because she'd been a single mom for so many years and raised her kids. And my dad was in my life, but he started a business and he had to start his life over. My mom raised us, and she moved to Coronado once I was older in high school, I think, to have an easier life for herself. So
very cool. Elizabeth, do you think your grandmother, grandfather, mother who's passed, Benny, who's passed, do you think that they've instilled in you some kind of knowledge of art or a new way to communicate or for what you do? Do you think who you are now is because of your family that looks above you in a different light?
There is so much of me that evolved from my different relationships and my family. From the traumas, from the resilience that I had to learn to survive these traumas, to the different kinds of eccentricities that I experienced with my mom. My mom was a very eccentric person, and anybody that knows my mom, Anita, will think of her and the many unusual memories that they had with her. She was not a conventional person. I think that my mom struggled with mental illness and with challenges, and with our challenges come great gifts. And she had a very challenging personality. Being close to her, having a more a mother-daughter relationship with her, there was not a lot of comfort, there was not a lot of affection in many regards. But what I learned from my mom was she was badass, and she just was, and she was hell on wheels.
She was.
And she would do things like nobody else did them. And like if you could dream up. So I think my sense of cognitive dissonance, of combining unique elements, of when to bring mariachis and this, to combine things in a totally unique way. Mm-hmm. That came from my mom. My brother was a DJ and
a drummer.
And my brother was originally a musician. He was an amazing drummer. His sense of rhythm, his sense of beat, his sense of music was just something he was born with. He was drumming from his earliest childhood. And after, he discovered music and DJing, he was like a pioneer in electronic music and DJing and spinning. And also of, the LGBT movement in San Diego, the original LGBTQ movement, and he was such a vital part of that. And the club scene was a home for the community at that time. And my brother would march. He would march against Anita Bryant. He would stand up for gay rights. And so I think that sense of advocacy and fighting and artistry and fighting for what you believe in really came from my brother. With my parents divorcing at such an early age, my brother was like a father figure, interestingly. But this was like my gay father. He was my brother, but he instilled in me my connection to the gay community.
He was so tall and beautiful. Yeah.
He was just tall. And he was so experimental. And so I never looked at art as what was the historic legacy of art. And don't get me wrong, I'm academic, I study art, I am not into cancel culture. I appreciate the evolution and the language that art is and the legacy that art is from the entire world. It's a language, an arts and culture language. I'm not into cancel culture. However, I'm thoroughly contemporary, and I like to always think beyond what we know into just being out of my comfort zone. And so what I make is just about out of my comfort zone. It's about social justice, and it's about combining elements in a kind of a extraordinary way. So my mother, my brother play a huge role in that. My grandfather plays a huge role in that because he is, like I said, he's this patriarch that I look up to, that I always want to please, that I want to make proud, that I want to take everything that I've learned and all the opportunities I've had in my life and to translate them into something meaningful. Mm-hmm. And I just hope that my grandfather looks at me and feels like I have such a strong personality, and you love or hate me, and it is what it is. I love you. I mean, I had you in my childhood. Wow. As a kindred spirit, and in those times it wasn't a given to be who we are now.
Yeah,
it wasn't. And I'm a little bit younger than you, but I
gotta ask you something. Would you paint shoes? Would you take a pair of shoes and paint them like your grandfather?
Going through the traumas of COVID right now, I feel like my mind is so strained, and to be able to think on your toes like that.
Who comes up with that? Who comes up with that in the 40s, that somebody has a pile of shoes that didn't quite make it out there in the world, and he found a way to put them together and paint them and lived off that? I mean, Elizabeth, is that just unbelievable?
And I do. I just, I worship my grandfather. He's godlike to me in some way because he's a spirit, that I look up to. And interestingly, I did.
But look at all the spirits you have now.
But I did help revive Hush Puppy shoes.
Okay.
So I have a connection to shoes. I recognize the, the essence, the history. And back when I was involved in the fashion industry in Los Angeles, I really was one of the key players in reviving Hush Puppy shoes. And, Malcolm Gladwell refers to it in The Tipping Point. My wonderful business partner that I was working with at the time, Joel Fitzpatrick, we laughingly took a lot of the credit, and he wound up in The Tipping Point. But it was a team.
Did you end up putting those platforms on them? They were just the Hush Puppies, and then are you responsible for making them pink? And all of a sudden they have the new platform, and oh my God,
we were all a creative
Hush
team.
Puppy, it was the most universal shoe in the world. Harry, did you ever wear Hush Puppies? Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, so yes, I was somehow connected to shoes, classic shoes, old shoes through Hush Puppies, but. I think that so much of what we do is unconscious, and we don't always know why we do what we do when we do it, and it takes some life and experience to rewind and then look through the tape again of our lives and figure it out.
So what kind of art do you do now? I know because, of course, I see it and I read it and I love it and I follow it, but we have viewers. So tell me, what artist are you here in our beautiful San Diego, South Bay, La Jolla area? Let's go one step further. Worldly. What kind of worldly artist are you?
What kind of worldly artist am I? Well, I, from the time I was a really small child, I started to create concepts in my mind about avant-garde art. And somehow, I am not sure how, but my feelers were out from my early childhood, and I discovered Andy Warhol.
Yay!
And I don't know how exactly, because I was a really small child.
Oh my
And maybe
God.
It was just of the day. I think it was like Parade magazine in the Sunday paper.
Either that or you liked soup. I don't know.
And I somehow discovered Andy Warhol, and I started to think of these deconstructed ideas, like, instead of making a regular movie, why don't you make a video of me sleeping? And then I found out, like, at the factory, they made, a movie called Sleep. And I thought, how interesting these deconstructed concepts were. Like, just to look at things from a conceptual level, not from what they were, but from what the different kind of meanings were that went into these constructs. I don't know why I was thinking like this when I was a little kid, but I was. I just was.
Because you found a safe place, probably. I'm not a therapist, but when I listen to people, honestly, you find a place that's safe, almost like a seed that finds its soil, and then once it is comfortable, the roots go, and then the top grows. And I think you were planting your roots. That's my opinion.
Well, it is, and I you know, and I share that I feel like my my relationship with my imagination and the imaginal realm were a safe place for me, because there was so much chaos at home that my imagination did become my safe place. But the other interesting thing...
That is so typical, Elizabeth. That is so typical. Yeah.
Well, the other interesting thing was that I also felt very comfortable being in the unknown. And I also felt okay experimenting with the unknown, because I had to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's given me a lot of flexibility.
Wow.
And so as an artist, I feel like, and this is one of the biggest pieces of advice I give, is like, I've never been a manufacturing,
artist.
Into repetition. I'm into being out of my comfort zone. That's what I'm into. And so on one hand, it's a safe space, and on the other hand, it gave me a flexibility.
Yeah. Tell me about your project called Survivor.
Well, the Survivor project is something that I created in response to the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. And I was invited to do a large-scale performance piece for the LA Art Show a couple of years ago.
When you say performance, dance, media, what exactly when you say performance, so people understand what performance is?
I am rooted in or influenced by Fluxus performance, which means that it's an experimental process. It's not the product, it's the process.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of...
I love that, by the way.
And there's a lot of aesthetic choices I make. So I experiment in a framework, in an idea, but within it, there's freedom of the participants to improvise. So there's a lot of improvisation, there's a lot of experimentation, and we don't know the outcome because there's no rehearsal. So I guess what makes it performance art versus
Just like
performance. Yeah, there's no rehearsal. You just have to go. Mm-hmm. So it's without getting into too much detail that will bore people. But
it's called Survivor?
It's called Survivor. Share your 98-second story, because every 98 seconds there's a sexual assault in the United States.
Oh my gosh!
And I've learned from discussing sexual assault and educating myself and doing this project, that just even discussing it, just even having the courage to stand in public and share and taking a stand against domestic violence and interpersonal violence and sexual assault actually can help reduce the statistic, because you're creating awareness, and awareness creates change. So I gathered a group of 21 contemporary or diverse artists in all media, mm-hmm. who had survived sexual assault.
Wow.
And we stood in public sharing our stories that we wove into poetry and spoken word and experimental forms, with the backdrop of a cellist who was improvising with us. And we were an ensemble, and we worked as an ensemble, but we were in a space that we'd never all been in together. We had to, so I put us all on a bus. We were all in uniform together, and we had to go into a space and sort of follow a choreography that we'd never practiced in the space, and do our thing, and then exit. So we came in as a unified body, and we exited as a unified body, and we presented our work.
And this was filmed?
And this was filmed, and the document of that performance became a short documentary that we shared with festivals around the world that has won awards. And
congratulations!
Thank you.
I saw the awards.
Yeah.
What other films have you done?
Well, in my younger years, when I wanted to become a director, I did music videos and I did promo pieces for record labels. And the music videos that I did were...
This was in LA.
This was in LA, and I did a piece for Hush Puppies, a promo piece for Hush Puppies that won some awards. I did, music videos that were in film festivals. But yet I just wanted to seek, I've always wanted to find a way to tell more truthful stories in this avant-garde experimental way that wasn't like other things. That was, whether you experience it live, whether you experience it on film, whether you see it on a wall, it's all a documentary. Whether I'm honoring my brother and the gay movement, that I experienced as a child, going through what my brother went through and liberating himself as a gay man. I want to tell that story. And that might just be a photograph, like I shared the photo with you.
Let me ask you, so what made you go from Los Angeles to San Diego? What made you come home?
I came home unexpectedly. My husband moved here for work, and I followed him here, and so I had to start over. And I still struggle being in San Diego, because I feel like there's, it's taken a long time for me to feel like myself here, and I've had to really work hard. In LA, it's easier to be yourself. In San Diego, I feel like I've had to work harder, but I enjoy a challenge, and I've tried my best.
I hear you. It's interesting because Chula Vista reminds me so much of Los Angeles. Don't ask me why. But then again, I see the comparisons. I see the fact that people from the Hispanic community are embraced in LA because of what they do. And the people here in our Hispanic community in Chula Vista are very embraced because of what they do. There are places you can go from ocean to lake in LA. We do the same thing in Chula Vista. We can go from an ocean to a lake, Otay Lakes. We have the ability to understand what's real in LA, and we know what's real in Chula Vista. In San Diego, it's a beautiful town. It reminds me of Disneyland. But if I had to pick a place to live, I'm home. This is it, my South Bay.
Well, diversity. I think that the diversity is what you have here, and for me, I miss that. I miss that cultural diversity in Los Angeles and in San Diego. As I said, this is a different time, and this is a different era, and from
it sure is.
Yeah, but having my first studio in San Diego in Barrio Logan. And I'd always driven over, the bridge and seen, the community there. And I thought, God, this feels like, seeing the murals, it just felt like such a rich community. Yeah. And I love warehouses and I love murals. And I'm like...
We have to thank Mario Torrero for those incredible murals.
Yeah,
and
so beautiful.
With what he's done. And the fact that you could go anytime. It's up to the person. If I wanted to go see the murals, I'll go there. Mario will be there. Hey, Mario, can I have a tour? Tell me about this. There was somebody, a Jewish, who did one of the murals. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. People from, it's amazing what they have offered.
Yeah, and so I feel like San Diego is a different community now, and with rising arts leaders especially,
they'll make a difference.
This intergenerational work.
You will make a difference.
We are supporting the BIPOC community. We're supporting the next generation of arts leaders. We're decolonizing art. We're bringing a whole new view. And so,
what other new things are on your horizon? What's on your workbench right now? If I came over to your house, what would your studio workbench be like?
That's a really good question, because I'll be honest with you. I'm deciding to move out of my space for the moment as I figure out my next move, and I donated a lot of my art supplies to Tasha Williamson, who's housing homeless families and motel projects for all. And I went down there and I took my art supplies to. I am such a admirer of Tasha's dedication to the community, and I donated my art supplies there for the time being. I'm with Rising Arts Leaders. It's really about relevant programming and what kind of experiences we can bring the community. We just had a wonderful event that we did. I'm on that programming, and to be honest with you, I really want to take. There's times to go forward and back, and there's part of me that's forward and part of me that's back, because I like to do things that are meaningful, and I just want to take my time to shape the next thing.
Yeah.
Survivor was a big thing. And again, my
I
grandfather
can't
being
wait
a
to
survivor.
see it. I can't wait to see it.
Well, it's very raw. It's just raw.
And the thing is, it's another form of what survivor means.
Exactly.
We have it in us. So we don't have to talk about it. I mean, it's interesting. If I never would have known that my mother was a Holocaust survivor, would I ever felt that, what is it about me that makes me different than somebody else? You know, what happens if it never would have been talked about? Thank God she did. Thank God I was able to find your roots.
Well, the trauma learning. So, learning from our resilience, because we're not going to get through these traumas. We all go through different adverse experiences in our lives, and we all have different degrees of trauma, and it's the resilience. And right now what we're experiencing is the need for community resilience. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be, you go from victim to survivor to thriver. You get to a place where you live.
Survivor to thriver.
Yeah.
I love it.
Victim, survivor, thriver.
Oh, and so, my God.
Through the resilience and community resilience.
I love it.
The characteristics
Victim,
of
survivor, thriver. I'm not going to forget that. That's the title of a book.
Yeah.
Is that the name of your next book?
Well, it's my connection to my grandfather and what I've learned and what we all learn is
Mr.
resilience.
Weinstock, did you hear that?
Thank you, Grandpa.
Yeah, you're being thought about, of course. You're so lucky that you've been able to experience the freedom and know how to live what's called outside of that comfort zone. Now, that's how I look at things. It took me until I was 60 some odd years old to realize I'm going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to like it because there's something out there. And it's really important what you're talking about. People shouldn't be afraid to try something. They really shouldn't, especially when it comes to documenting. You're a filmmaker. You have important words that you say. And as a dancer and somebody who loves music, I always look at music and dance as a different way to communicate in what we do. I'm interested in knowing your perception when it comes to the films that you make, the legacies you want to say. What is there, and do we have a new film that we will get to know about? Take it away, Elizabeth.
Well, I think so fondly of you and my memories of you because you represented that expression of embodiment. Your body was your medium. And
as a mime, yeah. I mean, that's what I did.
Well, it was an embodiment. And so it took me, and I feel like it took me many years to get to the place where my body was my medium. Mm-hmm. And it still isn't dance. When I say I do performance, I feel like performance is my primary medium now. It's like everything is a documentary. Everything is about...
Oh, so true. Everything can be a documentary. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
And I think, of early, influences and understanding that. And I think that some of the childhood trauma that I went through, going so deep into my imagination, I think there was a disconnect with my embodiment. And I'm still finding that. And I'm still kind of awakening my physical body in a lot of senses. And I think back to you and I remember just the muscular tone of your arms and the way you moved and your manner and your kindness and your originality, and that you were just you could not be a conventional person. It just wasn't in your blood. And I loved you. I loved that essence and your uniqueness and just I looked up to you so much.
Tell you, I had a hard time with people. I did have a hard time with people.
Well, you were different
because
you were just yourself. You were ahead of your time. That's all. Yeah. You were just ahead. It took the world decades to catch up with you, and now it has.
Yeah. Well, I think it's called slowing down in old age. But in the meantime, I know one thing, and from interviewing the Holocaust survivors that we've had, Ben and just Harry, Ursula, everybody that has come through here are survivors. They really focused on donating and giving. That if they were into I have to take and this belongs to me, But all these survivors, they're all 92, 97, 98. We just lost somebody here at the Chula Vista Heritage Museum, Frank Roseman. And these were people that were so unusual, but they had one thing in common. They knew how to give. And they didn't want anything in return. And when they were done giving, they wanted to know the next place that they could volunteer, because somewhere in their past, their volunteering and their giving is what got them through something as nuts as the Holocaust. Same thing with Ruthie. Ruthie would make it a point when you would hear her stories, the fact that even till 2 weeks before she passed away, and it was only 2 weeks before she passed away because it was Christmas time and schools were closed. Otherwise, she probably could have passed away on stage, okay? And when she was talking to the kids, she would talk about, we had to give. We had to volunteer. We got out there and did this, did this. When you talk with Dr. Edith Eger, she talks about the creativity that you had to have, or else you weren't going to survive. You know, if you were somebody who's used to eating with a spoon and somebody hands you a bowl and says, there you are, and you go, where's my spoon? I mean, they could shoot you for that. You had to figure out how to be creative, you know, and the weird thing is we're so trying to be careful in this COVID state as we bring ourselves up, where years ago they would do anything for the stuff that we throw away. They would do anything. I remember going to to a high school, Mar Vista High School, giving a talk last year. And I did the talk, and then I had to wait during the lunch period, and then for the next class. And I looked at the kids, and I said to the teacher, I can't believe what your field looks like your cafeteria area, the outdoor space where people are eating. If that food would have been collected and taken to Auschwitz, do you know how many lives would have been saved? And she just said, okay, I've got to do something. And I'm like, all right. She says, we have Sandy who's here to talk about the Holocaust, yada, yada. Before we get started, we're going to go out on the field. We're going to go out in the play area or the eating area. And if you think there's something in that area that would have saved a Holocaust survivor, you got to go pick it up. Within 5 minutes, that room was completely cleaned up. And I really hope that it wasn't just for the one day, but it left a message. When we were talking with Edith Eger, when I had the mayor come with me, and she said, when it comes to food, I eat everything. And if you're not going to eat it, I'll reach over and eat it, because we cannot waste. What's really neat is in the art world, we have learned this really cool word. And the fact that we take things, and it's called multimedia, and we introduce other things. Somebody's trash could be somebody's treasure, and you make this amazing piece of art with it. I know you do it. I know you do it when it comes to film. And what we do is we take this form of survival and we bring it into something. So if you want to expand on that, please.
Well, the thing that, for me, art is my way. It's, in many respects, art is like my religion, because it's what I believe in. It's what I find a higher power in, and a connection to something greater. And it is my expression for showing how I care. And I think it's the way that I'm able to connect with people, to build bridges, to build community, to give a person an opportunity to express themselves. I mean, I think
it's a communication.
It's the ultimate caring. I think that art is a set of strategies also. You know, like when you said you have to be creative, I was looking up different definitions of conceptual art, and that was one of the most simple definitions. It's a set of strategies, and you just sort of figure out your roadmap to something through concepts and ideas. Mm-hmm. So everyone is an artist in
they
their
certainly
own way.
are. They
and
certainly
so
are.
I don't think...
If you can draw a straight line, great. If you can't draw the straight line, it's perfect.
But however you fix your car, however you do your hair, whatever, that's your own unique expression. And so I think that, for me, what I'm growing into and what I'm evolving into is a process of, stepping forward. With my work, I try to step forward into the community with courage. We talk about when we fight hate, when you fight a system of oppression, you have to be a courageous person. You have to take some risk by putting yourself out there. And putting yourself out there and taking a risk isn't always easy because there is...
and you can't fight hate with hate.
Yeah.
You have to be able to fight hate with love, and you have to be able to fight... I find that word interesting, to fight hate. You just won't accept hate. Again, it's that word tolerant. You cannot tolerate. No, I won't accept it.
I guess for me, I feel like the moment that I respond to hate with hate, then hate has won. Because if the hate is what's in my heart, then hate is won. And so the path of choosing love is a path of resistance. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to... it's not hard. It's just, it takes a lot of experience and coming at the same thing over and over and over again. Like, even though what I do is always experimental, it's really not, because I'm just building and building and building with layers, peeling
from
the onion.
Past and things that you've taken.
And adding experience.
Like a how do you say it, like a buffet.
It's a smorgasbord. It really is.
It is. It's a buffet. It's an artist buffet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you take this, take this, take this, take this, put this, there you go.
And then you try it again, and you try the recipe a different way, in a new way. Now, the thing that I realized, and I'm a big advocate for this, is that, because I am working with people and their trauma and their situations, their existential crises, I do have this pastiche and this kind of smorgasbord of experimentation, but I've also educated myself. And I haven't just experimented independently. I'm part of a community of healers. I have a master's in a sort of experimental form of psychology, because this form of psychology resonated with me. It wasn't the most mainstream form, but it's the form that, after all my searching, it resonated the most with me, which is spiritual psychology, as taught by Ron and Mary Hulnick. And that is not a clinical degree, and I recognize that it wasn't a clinical degree.
It's your degree. It's what makes you who you are. You're able to introduce your art in there, and there should be no excuses for that. It's something to be super proud of. So,
but then I built on that, and so it wasn't enough. Like with the art that I wanted to do, and really being in the community. I saw when I was doing my early projects of very kind of large-scale social justice projects, I could fake it. We could all fake it. And we can fake it, and we can take on human lives and sort of get through it. But I realized if I want to be responsible, I want clinical experience, clinical hours, working with a community, working with supervisors, working with peers, and knowing my scope of practice.
Of course.
And so I dedicated the last few years to
finding a way and saying, with the knowledge that I have, this is the Elizabeth Tobias technique. Like Viktor Frankl had a technique. Like Edith Eger has a technique. It's okay to come up with the Elizabeth Tobias. Back in the heyday, we had Rolfing. It was Mr. Rolf who taught you how to get your muscles aligned. You had to learn it from somewhere. Where you learned it, Elizabeth, is you went deep into your soul after you were able to say to people, okay, I have a degree. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to make this work for me.
And then I discovered, after many years of searching again for the continuation educationally, what educational system checks all my boxes? Where can I go that is, that feels sacred to me, that feels like the right next move? And I found expressive art therapy and the philosophy of Paulo Coelho. and Judith Greer Essex and Wes Chester were my teachers here in San Diego.
She was from San Diego.
She's here.
Gorgeous dancer.
Yes.
It's been around. Again, if I was interviewing Edith Essex at your age now, she'd be saying the same thing. The fact is, she went to the School of Dancers Hard Knocks and Art Hard Knocks. Do you know what I'm saying? And after a while, you realize that you went to the best place you could go to, deep into your soul.
Well, under supervision of, and so I found a philosophy. I finally found an art program, like an accelerator for me. For many years, I knew what I was looking for, but I had to be with a real specific community who could take all of it and help me really, really have a much more global
broad sense
perspective. And so I discovered Yuri Bronfenbrenner and a human ecology theory. I discovered Paulo Canil. I discovered some views of feminism and postmodernism from a different light of
but it's just like that buffet. This I like, this I don't like. Oh, I'll take a little bit of this. Oh, I tasted that didn't work. Well, let me go over here. And it's interesting because you are who you are by so many different things. I did it as a mime. Studied flamenco, studied tap dance, studied, how to dance on my toes, so that when I did what I did as a mime, it wasn't just, okay, here's the wall, here's the rope, that I could go one step further. And I'll tell you, we talked about it earlier before we started filming, was what I learned from Marta in the middle of nowhere. And guess what? She didn't have to please anybody except what she painted on her wall. And I think we do that in our head, that we don't have to get out there and paint our walls, but it's really nice when we can come up with our form of, imagination.
Well, a real liberation for me of not feeling like I had to please people was stepping into feminism and abandoning the male gaze and feeling like, I don't know, I was able to explore all of the different parts of my personality. I mean, and this is tricky. People misunderstand feminism, and I just encourage, for concepts that bring up fear, any reaction that we have that's fear-based, I think puts up walls, and I'm surprised at how hard it is for people to be open to new concepts. And I think there's misunderstandings about feminism, and for me it was just really, I don't know, it allowed me to step over a threshold, to own who I was and my strength of not needing to be small. And I think that for me was just owning
and the fact
myself.
that you've created a permanent voice through film. You create films. You are an award-winning filmmaker, which is outstanding. And the fact is that people can come to you for their own healing and therapy. Am I correct? And if people need to reach you, they find you at...
Well, the best way to contact me is through my website, ElizabethTobiasArts.com.
Okay.
But I'm on the steering committee of Rising Arts Leaders, and I'm doing community programming now. And I'm working to, I'm the oldest person on Rising Arts Leaders. We're saying rising, but I like to be intergenerational. I have friends.
What does age mean? You're ageless. You're ageless. You're timeless when it comes to art.
Exactly. There was a painter that I met many years ago, and he talked about when you're in the temple of art, you're ageless. You can leave your old shoes outside, and when you go inside of the temple of art, you're ageless. And his body was like his old shoes, and his spirit was like the ageless temple.
Yeah. I think we started creating a little bit of that here on 3rd Avenue with Rich Walker. If you ever have a chance, you want to go to Art on 3rd, he's so well known. And when you go there, and the minute you walk in, it almost reminds me of what we talked about with Amargosa. You walk in and the paintings are on the ceiling, on the wall, over here, over there. There's a stage. You can perform. You could do, and I mean, you didn't know we had that in Chula Vista, did you?
I didn't.
Okay.
I was talking to my aunt on my way here, my Aunt Leah, who's also been such an inspiration in my life.
I love Leah. my God.
Leah has been fighting for social justice her whole life, and Leah's still, I think, more progressive than I am. As progressive as I am, Leah's ideas of social justice are profound, and I learned from her. And Chula Vista is a backdrop of my history, but I want to rediscover it with new eyes.
I can't wait to take you and show you. And I will say that when it comes to Weinstocks, Leah, you, the family, Bolinskis, the whole mishpoche, as we call it, family, I just want to make sure that I can give you and Tobias, my full heart because of what you've given me and helping this dream come true. It's small, it's in Chula Vista, but guess what? We are of quality and not the quantity. And I feel that we can grow. And I see, Elizabeth, that really the last time you and I had a talk, I think you were 13, and you're in your 30s now, 40s now? 50s.
Something. I've lost count. I'll be honest with you. I've lost count. But I'm proud to say I was born in 1967. However old that makes me, I think 53.
Have you been back to Chula Vista?
I have been back to Chula Vista to bring my daughter on little tours. And for Mother's Day last year, maybe not last year because we were in the pandemic. Time is a blur in the pandemic life, but
it is.
The year before that, we came down to do a little tour, drive by my grandmother's house, my old house at 356 First Avenue, and Temple Beth Shalom. And it kind of broke my heart to walk into Temple Beth Shalom and see so much dedication to my family and to be so disconnected from that. And my daughter, how I guess I had a postcard of my grandfather's funeral for her walking in that synagogue and seeing this heritage of her grandfather's name here and her aunt's name there and her Uncle Benny's name there.
Yeah.
She was just in awe. Yeah. And I feel, we wish that we could be more connected, and somehow when you're raising a kid, your life is such a frenetic roller coaster.
This is one of the safest, most wonderful cities. We've come a long way, and the fact is we still have our heritage, exactly what you said. We have our synagogue here that's been around for 60 years, okay? A long, long time. The fact that where I'm sitting right now in this library, this used to be my elementary school, F Street School. And after being in Las Vegas for 25 years and thinking, okay, I've got to get away, it is incredible to come back. And this is my home, and I want to do everything I can as an artist or whatever. I'm still trying to figure out what the word is. I want to do what I can to give back as a person. And I see that you're doing that, and you're doing incredible things. I will make sure that as you have your films up and running, that we will know about them. You've got an event going on for Thanksgiving in La Jolla, if I'm not mistaken, and that is a chalk walk where people can do their chalk work, correct? So I look forward to joining you on that. It feels like we've only spoken for 5 minutes, and I hate to say we've done 50 minutes?
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I really feel like, as I said, I can't thank you enough. I mean, just the visual anthropology of this exhibit is, I can't honor you enough. I can't thank you enough.
No.
And one of my best
friends... It takes a team. You're looking at one of them right there, Harry.
Yeah, but one of my best friends, Harsha Menon, is a visual anthropologist, and she just finished, these amazing degrees, and I wish that she could see this exhibit, the artifacts, the story, the history, the soul.
We're looking forward to it, and again, with people like you, Elizabeth, and your family and other families, and I have a feeling that when we reopen, I don't know if we're going to have to sell tickets, because it's just going to be, it's what we created. And thank God that they gave me another year. Let's figure out where this is going to go. In the meantime, I will tell you, I have such gratitude in my heart for everybody who's made this possible. Names that if I were to just put the names out there, I would be doing an hour show of just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, from Mayor Salas to Joy Watley to Caesar to, Harry, Orgavon, Shelley, Susan. If I just keep Peter, I mean, if I just keep going on, it's incredible. And to me, it's a lesson here. I also know that my shows are a little long. Yes, they are of quality instead of quantity. And I want to have you come back. Is that okay? You come back anytime. I'm serious. All right. With that, I hate to say this. We have to say bye.
Cut.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wer wird das in mich schatzen? Oi, oi, Gott ist größer, hat doch gewünscht mein Häuser, die mir sind gegeben, die mir sind ausgegeben, die mir sind ausgegeben. Starker, freilich, ich die Malke, du der